You brought no statement. Varenkel's breath caught against his polished incisor ridge, teeth bared in a grin meant to provoke. Or did Earth forget the format of diplomacy? His voice rolled through the hall like the scrape of stone across mirrored floors, amplified not by bravado but by design. The tribunal chamber of Terra was a vault of theater and verdict. Every polished surface reflected authority. Every tiered seat was a declaration of hierarchy. The ceiling bore latticework etched with battle pacts and embargo rulings from 1,000 campaigns, none of them human. In the middle of that splendor, the air shifted. A single figure stepped past the threshold. No escort, no flag, no forward motion beyond what duty required. Dravik Solon wore no color. His suit was flat black, its cut too severe for comfort, too perfect for accident. He carried nothing, not a datapad, not a seal, not even a gesture. He did not stop. He walked through the aisle as if the chamber were an archive, long since abandoned. His footsteps didn't echo, they registered, each one bending the tension in the floor tiles, forcing the council to recognize his approach whether they meant to or not. Councillor Thornak Veer shifted on his pedestal. "This is their representative," he muttered, claws tightening along the rim of his control slate. "At least the Dralv sent their apology from orbit. Earth sends a specter. Maybe that's the idea," Kelrix Jund offered from the broadcast gallery. "One clean figure makes a better headline than panic." Jund adjusted the zoom on the overhead laser plasma array. The lens trembled, automated focus systems confused by Solon's thermal profile. It had happened once before, years prior, during a nullification summit on Thrask 4. They'd blamed the static then. Now, no one said a word. Solon reached the edge of the semicircular platform and stopped without invitation. He didn't glance at the counselors, nor did he seek the visual trigger of a speaking signal. Instead, he stood behind the only unlit seat in the hall, Earth's chair, smaller than protocol dictated, placed deliberately behind the auxiliary viewing range of the primary heads-up displays. It hadn't been used in 6 cycles. Still, it was clean. "You'll not speak then." Varenkel pressed again. "Is this silence intended as strategy, or is it the only tactic your world still understands?" Solon's eyes didn't move. He simply looked forward at nothing, or everything. His hands remained loose at his sides. There was no tension in his jaw, no tightness around his shoulders. He was not waiting, he was observing. In the control booth, Jarek Truon, legal observer for procedural integrity, noticed a flutter across his internal treaty ledger. One of the embedded access threads in the Earth file flickered orange. Not red, not error, just updated. He tapped the screen. The line reset to green before his touch registered. He said, under his breath. "What?" asked his aide, Vesk. It blinked. "Systems calibrating. Probably back-end lag on the clause interpreter." Truon's fingers hovered. He ran a query. Clause INES observer exceptions. Status dormant. Signed. Timestamp, 12 standard years prior. Origin Terran Legal Department, Pre-Integration Division. He frowned. "I don't remember this clause being active." "It isn't," said Vesk. "It's buried, only applies under non-proportional authority revocation during declared mediation." Truon leaned back. "And if Earth was never formally given full authority," Vesk blinked, "then it's technically not revocation, or it's all revocation." A ripple of motion passed through the chamber, not physical, not digital, a shift of alignment, like the wind adjusting behind a closed door. Solon hadn't moved, but the chamber's thermal distribution shifted by 3 degrees. Councillor Strandveller, commander of the Outer Reach fleets, adjusted the security feed on his wrist console. The heads-up overlay of orbital positions displayed as normal. But one Earth-flagged satellite, dead for a decade, now pinged as responsive. He dismissed the alert. Atmospheric scatter. Earth's tech was always unstable. Varenkel stood and descended 2 steps towards Solon. His robes swept the floor behind him, gold-threaded and heat-reactive. "You arrive without a case file. You submit no language request. You withhold the courtesy of even a translated greeting. Is your role here purely ceremonial, or are you daring us to acknowledge you?" Silence. Even the atmosphere read differently around Solon. The chamber's acoustics, tuned for wide dispersal, failed to amplify him, not because he was quiet, but because he was unreadable. No mic picked him up. No telemetry responded to his presence beyond biometric outline. Still, his heartbeat was logged, steady, not calm, not escalated. neutral. Jun zoomed in again. The display failed to resolve the detail in Solin's eyes. Maybe he's not transmitting, Thornak said, half to himself. Could be masking. Reflective skin netting. Embedded neural fog. No, Truon said softly. He's transmitting. Just not to us. On the main tribunal display, a feed pulsed once. Earth's seat was now flagged present, a detail nobody remembered enabling. Varenkel's voice darkened. Is this a game then? Do you think your presence intimidates? Earth holds no vote, no leverage. You signed the Maritime Silence Pact with blood you barely earned. Speak, or we continue without you. At the far right of the dais, Councillor Hovrak Ener flipped open the Council's master charter. He scanned for the override lines, intending to nullify Earth's participation entirely. That's when he saw it. Clause INES, signed, dated, validated by unanimous Council assent 12 years prior, triggered under symbolic exclusion during armed neutral hearing. Status, pending live test verification. He looked up. This clause is real, he whispered. Of course it's real, Thornak growled. It's ancient, legacy code from pre-unification drafts. It's active. Varenkel took another step. This ends now. Stand down or be removed. Solon blinked once. Not a flinch, not a twitch, a decision. Every laser plasma display along the upper concourse flickered. For a split second, the Council charter reloaded, header altered. Administrative contact, Terran observer node. Then it reset. No error was flagged. Only a single AI thread in the treaty parser reflagged itself. Origin, Earth, function, waiting. Still, Solon hadn't spoken. He simply stood, and for the first time, the Council began to wonder if silence wasn't the absence of diplomacy. It was the end of it. You just saw that, right? Jarek Troon's fingers hovered over his audit slate, knuckles rigid, screen pulse fluttering beneath translucent glass. No one answered him. Behind the review bench, data threads rippled down the legal mesh, barely visible, code veins reconfiguring silently across the chamber's procedural lattice. Councillor Vorenkel remained standing at the dais, the aftertaste of his challenge still hanging in the air like a sharp breath, not fully exhaled. Dravik Solon had yet to move. That silence, anchored, untouchable, now felt heavier than before. Not performative, present. Jarek's voice dropped lower. Section F2 just spiked. Minor input recursion in the treaty mesh. Origin path from dormant node. Terran archive header. Clause INS. Pinged. Vesk, the assistant rotating through backbench observer duties, glanced over and shrugged. Pinged doesn't mean called. Audit echoes do that sometimes. Backwash from recalibration. Doesn't feel like backwash. Jarek ran a gesture trace across the terminal. The clause is live logged. It shouldn't be touching active session memory. Ever. The Council's debate chamber hadn't shifted visually, but the atmosphere had thickened in ways no sensor could catalog. The air itself seemed to tip, molecules drawn slightly inward around Earth's envoy. Solon hadn't spoken. He hadn't blinked in minutes, but the system around him was adjusting, as though it recognized something the delegates had not. Up near the fleet control arch, Commander Strand Veller tapped his wristband twice. He was reviewing comm authority threads, standard recon on shared channel privileges, before any formal fleet dispatch. The data was clean. Then it wasn't. A full ring of outer fleet ships flashed a flicker of non-verification. The transmission looped twice, then bounced. Veller frowned. That's wrong. Commander? Asked a clerk below the central ring. These are fleet comms, all ours. Yet I'm getting duplicate acknowledgments on nodes tagged as background archives. Echoes from a backup relay. No, they're not late. He rechecked the timestamp. They're early. Across the chamber, the tribunal's legal index glitched once, casting a ripple of shadow across the central laser plasma display. A single banner shifted without touch. Earth's administrative seal, long dormant, rendered in faded watermark, now subtly glowing under the chamber's ambient light. Voren, muttered Councillor Hovrak Ener from his post. Have we ever formally revoked Earth's observer status, like procedurally? Voren didn't answer. His eyes were on Solon now, not with contempt, but revision. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to measure the figure again with updated calibration. Solon moved. One step, nothing more. Then with absolute calm, he brought his hands behind his back, left over right, an interlocking gesture so symmetrical it looked ritualized. That single motion carried a kind of gravity with it, as though the room tilted imperceptibly toward it. At the chamber's edge, the audit terminal flashed a brief error. Jurek's display sputtered once before stabilizing. The clause had shifted, not invoked, not breached, but recategorized. From legacy protocol to live marker, he whispered. That's a handoff. From where? Vesk asked. From the session. Vesk blinked, but no one filed a motion. The clause doesn't require motion, it requires condition. And what condition just got met? Jurek stared toward the dais, symbolic exclusion under arbitration context. Earth's seat is behind the visual barrier of the primaries. It wasn't included in the judicial light column. You're telling me that sitting too far from the table counts? In a Terran clause, yes. The upper panels of the tribunal shimmered briefly. For a second, every council insignia on the laser plasma display shrank marginally, except one. Earth's crest, long used only as a placeholder, had gained a frame, a silver outline, not user-enabled, not broadcasted. Back on the floor, Stranveller's system pinged again. He barked, "Stop routing fleet node inputs. Something's feeding authorization from an unregistered channel." One of the clerks answered without looking up. "Sir, no new connections have been logged." "That's not what I asked." The clerk hesitated. "Then we're being overridden by existing access." Veller stood upright. His hand hovered near the emergency relay that connected the summit to orbital coordination. The screen refused input. Hands-off lock engaged. He turned toward Voron. "Something's waking up in our backbone." Hovrak ran his thumb across the charter again. The text crawled now, auto-adjusting headers. Clause IN sat at the top of the exceptions tab. Next to it, a line had appeared. Condition met. Awaiting validation signal. Solon didn't file anything, he murmured. "He doesn't have to," said Jurek. "The clause doesn't require petition. It recognizes posture." "That's not possible. It's Terran." A distant tremor ran through the laser plasma displays. Nothing loud, just a rhythm mismatch in refresh rate, like a machine trying to read two conflicting time codes. Counselor Thornak Veer reached for his console, intending to flag the chamber for technical recalibration, but the display refused the input, pulsing red once before blinking green again. The input had been redirected. Kelrix Jund whispered into his headset mic, "Archive visual, cut the wide. Keep it on Earth's delegate. Don't zoom." "Why not?" "Because I think the system's tracking posture recognition." "You think he's being scanned?" "No, I think he's doing the scanning." In the audit pit, Jurek opened the hard copy treaty logs, redundant, analog backups stored beneath the main chamber for ceremonial use. He turned to the Terran Integration Index, page 117, Clause IN, legal transfer under conditional exclusion. It wasn't highlighted. It had been re-inked. Fresh formatting, time-stamped to 20 seconds prior. He closed the ledger. The room was no longer running a tribunal. It was processing a transition, and only one figure in the room had never said a word. Solon's gaze hadn't shifted. His hands remained still. He was no longer attending. He was witnessing. "You don't even blink, do you?" Voron Kell stepped forward, robes shifting like banners drawn through wet ash, his voice soaked in contempt and hollow grandeur. "You came to be ignored, and we've granted it. Are you waiting for someone to pity your silence, Solon, or have you forgotten how speech works?" The chamber didn't respond. Neither did Dravik Solon. He remained behind the low-lit earth chair, hands still folded at his back, motionless, breath evenly drawn, not in meditation or restraint, but something stranger, as if stillness itself had been encoded into him. Voron's fingers unfurled slowly, his palm flattening into the air as he raised it shoulder-high and swept it downward in a dismissive arc, mocking, theatrical, pointed directly at Solon. "This council is the weight of irrelevance." A brief intake from Hovrak and air broke the still. "Don't, too late." In a chamber designed for semantic war and performative legalism, the insult was an instrument. But this time, it struck something not rhetorical. Dravik Solon adjusted. A shift barely wider than a breath. One foot slightly behind the other, spine extended, chin tilted until the apex of his gaze aligned with the central judicial beam. He did not raise his hand. He did not return the gesture. He didn't need to. All across the chamber, Heads-up displays dimmed by a fraction, only noticeable because every counselor glanced reflexively at the drop in clarity. On the main laser plasma board, Earth's insignia flashed once in low amber, a single flicker, then Claus Nike, long buried, moved. No vote was cast. No voice triggered it. It activated the moment Solon adjusted his stance. Lines of authority collapsed invisibly. Under the Council's governance mesh, a treaty layer resorted itself silently. Earth's administrative credential shifted from archived observership to active arbitration anchor. A crackle of motion hit the broadcast tier. Jund, the tribunal broadcaster, caught the flick on his input column and cursed beneath his breath. Is someone running override tests? The display just toggled priority admin field. Earth got flagged as root. No one's touching input, came the reply from the tech bay. We're reading false pings from legacy channels. False doesn't overwrite root, Jund snapped. Strand Velour barked into his command relay. Fleet command, report. Marshal, came a delayed voice over the bridge line. Request looping. Systems are asking for dual verification, but duplicating keys from Earth's diplomatic passkeys. That's not possible. Marshal, it already happened. An orbiting relay node above Terra blinked out of sequence. The black box telemetry routed its last recorded event to the main table. Signal path severed. Access source rewritten. Hovrak stared down at his desk. The treaty charter's legal overlay had redrawn the Council's ownership map in real time. Territories still held by member states remained, but next to each a watermark. Claus Nike pending review. Varan, he said quietly, we need to halt this session. You'll pause for a stance. Varan snarled. He hasn't even spoken. Exactly, Hovrak replied, staring into the laser plasma feed, and still every node in our system is revalidating around him. Solon shifted again, now returning his head to center. Eyes open, expression flat. That's when the Council's private relay blacked out, an internal comm duct that had never been externally routed, now blinking red across the chamber perimeter. In its place, a text field emerged on the main display. Recognition source invalidated. Authorization rolled up. Strand Velour shouted, cut power to the display relay. Thornak Veer responded from the command pit, voice tight, you can't. Power access is now listed under Terran designation, observer node authority. An audible intake of breath passed through the room, not fear yet, but the echo of realization, uncoiling. This is subversion, Varan growled. This is obedience, Solon said for the first time. The word cleaved through the chamber, not projected, not elevated, just spoken, yet heard by all as if the floor itself carried it upward. Every backlit sigil, across the perimeter frames dimmed. Claus Nike bloomed across the legal backdrop, like a vein traced backward to the heart. Kelrick's Jund leaned into his mic, his voice lower now. We're not running a summit anymore. This is compliance playback. The Council still holds sovereignty, Thornak insisted. This is protocol drift, not command. You're wrong, said Jarek Truen from his audit seat. We ratified this clause 12 years ago. The vote was unanimous. Earth wasn't even seated. They wrote it into the legal redundancy layers, Hovrak added. We ratified the ceremonial annexes. They gave us theater while encoding their chain of succession. Velour's comm line went dark. His eyes scanned the arc above the gallery. Orbital relays down, just the one, asked Vesk. No, Velour replied. Eyes wide now. That was the anchor relay for all Council orbital command keys. The treaty charter reloaded again. Heads-up displays along the side benches no longer recognized user interaction. Every panel displayed a frozen symbol, a pair of overlapping rings, the Earth seal, a version no one in the chamber had seen before. Jund whispered again, this isn't software. No, Truen answered. It's inheritance. Varan Kell finally stepped back, not in retreat, but in re-evaluation. This is a coup. No, Solon answered, still unmoved. This is clause fulfillment. Every voice faltered. Even the gallery technicians fell still. The feed stabilized not on Council symbols, but Earth's watermark, now glowing soft at every legal terminal. Hovrak touched his panel. It did not respond. He looked up. The system's listening to him now. Override stack. Confirm handshake. Run it again. Force the push. Strand Valor snapped. fingers jabbing his command interface, wristband interface, streaking data threads across his personal heads-up array. Nothing moved. The fleet control grid blinked once, hesitated, then denied his second input with a silent rejection window. Access rejected. Authority revoked. No error code. No diagnostic loop. Just finality. Strand's pupils narrowed as he leaned into the edge of the command rostrum. We're not locked out. We've been overwritten. He spoke low, but not to hide the words. He was talking through clenched teeth, measuring his own disbelief as he heard it aloud. From the upper gallery, Kelrix Jund adjusted the feed composite. 3 angles on Solon, 1 on the tribunal table, 1 wide frame showing the sigil board. Except now, the council insignias were muted, color drained, soft gray overlays in the corner of the display where once heraldry shimmered with gold and arc blue. Earth's watermark pulsed slow, nested within each crest. He whispered into his headset, "Cut the pan feed. Focus the chamber cam on Zone 4. We'll frame this as symbolic defiance. Human envoy stages a silence protest. Tie the feed to tradition. Give it narrative shape." The transmission cut out. Hard, black static replaced live frames. Every input console rebooted in sequence. The main control unit flickered one final warning across the interface. Visual relay interrupted. Verification requested from root echo server origin. Earth Jund's hands hovered over the panel, unmoving. "I didn't send a request," he muttered. "It wasn't yours to send," said the technician next to him, pale, eyes locked on a dim diagnostic panel. The system made it itself. Below them the council floor was shifting. Not in chaos, there was no shouting, no scrambling, but in weight, heads angled differently, postures subtly adjusted. The eyes no longer pointed at Solon with derision. Now they looked past him, toward terminals they no longer trusted. Thornak Veer broke the silence. "We have recovery contingencies." Voran didn't respond. Thornak persisted, teeth tight. "We planned for comm hijack scenarios, false routing, signal spoofing, bridge separation. This fits a breach template, not total collapse." "You're naming symptoms," said Hovrak en air without turning. "This isn't mimicry. This is inheritance asserting itself." He tapped the old world control dial inlaid into his bench. Manual command, designed during the first consolidation era, when systems still required analog fails, AFIS. The dial clicked into position. A yellow line buzzed across his private heads-up, then vanished. The chamber lights dipped, a subtle dimming like breath drawn too slow, the light itself seeming to pause mid-transit. Heads-up interfaces across the benches blinked white for a moment. Not error, reset. A purge initiated by a source no one authorized. At the back of the chamber, a clerk leaned in close to his workstation. "My interface wants DNS confirmation." "What server?" "Observer Node 7. Terran Legal Cloud. It says it can't proceed until Echo approval is returned." "Hardline override," barked Strand. "I tried. It won't accept council encryption. We're not recognized as governing tier." The air felt charged, not with heat or light, but something older, like the kind of quiet that followed after the lights failed in ancient starports, when machinery went still, not from outage, but from judgment. Voran Kell opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. He tried again. "Issue emergency suspension of tribunal protocol, full motion recess." "Recess doesn't suspend node command," Hovrak answered. "The clause doesn't recognize chamber authority once symbolic exclusion is confirmed." Strand's glare cut across the hall. "There's no clause in the archive that includes orbital control. There wasn't supposed to be," Jarek Truan said, standing now from the audit bench. "But we ratified more than we understood. We approved ceremonial shadow clauses to avoid debate backlogs. That authority went somewhere." "It went into the wording," Hovrak added. "Nested authority, redundancy phrased as inheritance." Across the wall, the master board flickered again. This time, the council's official ledger displayed not status, but query. "Is the tribunal still sovereign?" Awaiting verification. The silence cracked. "Who the hell asked that?" Vaylor growled. "No one in this room," Jund said. Then a new prompt. "Please confirm governing node, council or Earth archive." The cursor blinked. No one touched the terminal. Solon did not move. Jund swallowed and tapped his backup relay. "Do we at least have archive-only feed?" A slow response, then static, then silence, then a single image. It wasn't Solon. It was the Earth seal, projected not as a symbol, but as a permission prompt. Its design was altered, not the public variant. This one had segmented layers, like folded paper peeled open. The border rippled as if sensing the room. Strand looked to the orbital tracker on his wrist. Still no fleet input. All ships above Corinne Terra are showing anchor state mode. That's fallback behavior. Signal deadlock. They're not responding to us because they're waiting for new route confirmation. From Solon, Thornak asked. From the claws, Hovrak said. He doesn't give commands. He only has to remain present. And if he leaves? Thornak asked again. Doesn't matter, Truen said, lowering his head. The claws already activated. Earth isn't negotiating. They're enacting. One of the smaller side screens dimmed entirely. A spinning ring of language codes appeared and collapsed, then restructured into a simpler phrase. Command origin verified. Solon observer. Execution state. Not delegate. Not diplomat. Executor. Voran finally looked at Solon again. You planned this, he said. Solon did not answer. Because he didn't need to. The system already had. Run the override, Hovrak Air ordered flatly, his voice raw from calculation, not panic. Code 6. Full recess lockdown. Tribunal-wide reset. The command relay beside him lit green, then blinked to amber. After a beat, the laser plasma panel issued a neutral reply in standard typeface. Override request acknowledged, awaiting echo validation from observership node. Earth. Hovrak stared. His fingers hovered over the console as if contact had triggered contamination. It's not deferring to tribunal clearance. It's reclassifying the override as external policy arbitration. Across the chamber, the heads-up displays fell into standby mode one by one. Delegate terminals flickered out of session. The judicial timestamp on the main board stopped counting. It didn't freeze. It paused. Strand Velar leaned across the tactical bench, throat tight. The council hasn't paused a session since the Krolus schism. It didn't then either, muttered Truen from the audit bench. It only looked like it did. Thornak Veer stepped forward, boots tapping with uneven rhythm across the floor. He unsheathed his personal security relay, slotted it into the dais, and triggered the recessed control grid meant for emergencies, floor-level suppression locks, once reserved for riots or diplomatic violence. The floor panels trembled under their own inertia, then retracted slightly before reassembling. Denial pattern glowed red across the edge. Request rejected, he read aloud. Access requires confirmation from clause-bound administrator. Vaylor turned slowly. What does that mean? It means, Hovrak said, staring into his interface. Every fallback we thought was council-controlled is now a conditional execution node. And the condition isn't us. Kelrix Jund, still seated up in the observation booth, watched as the tribunal feed scrolled into template analysis mode. The stream was no longer showing real-time video. Instead, it analyzed reactions. Framed keywords from ambient voice scans surfaced in the corner. Revoked, unrecognized, shifted, ratified. He leaned into the broadcaster's console and switched to manual lens control. The camera ignored him. It pivoted unprompted, locking again on Solon. Stop tracking the delegate, he whispered. I'm not, said the technician beside him. It's reading him as anchor. Anchor of what? Session state. On the tribunal floor, the ambient lights began to drop, slowly, like shadows folding across themselves. It wasn't darkness, it was subtraction. Color drained from the banners overhead. The council's crest above the tribunal seal no longer displayed its historical glyphs. In their place, a hollow ring flickered once and settled at center. Truen watched from behind a dimming slate. We gave them this. No one gives what they don't understand, said Hovrak. We voted. We passed line items. We streamlined years of procedural backlogs by letting automated clauses bind each resolution. Thornak snapped. Are you blaming efficiency now? I'm blaming blind habit. Another screen blinked to static, then shifted to a still frame. Earth's charter signature page, dated 12 cycles ago, now reclassified from archived to enacted. A countdown bar glowed faint at the corner of the screen, ticking down in seconds. Vaylor squinted. Where did that timer come from? It's embedded in the clause, Jarek Truen answered. Part of the symbolic exclusion line. If activation conditions are met without opposition for more than 300 seconds, Earth's execution vector proceeds. Meaning what? Meaning Earth never needed to act. Just wait. Voran finally moved, breaking his statue-like stance from behind the central rail. Then someone stopped the damn timer. I already tried, said Thornak. It doesn't read me as input. Then try Solon, Hovrak said. No one moved. Dravik Solon remained where he had always stood, at the back, behind the smallest seat, in the coldest corridor of tribunal light, his eyes open, hands at rest, his posture undisturbed. But now, the room behaved as if he had spoken first. As the final 10 seconds ticked, the lights fell once more, this time, dimming to a threshold the chamber had not known since its pre-digital reconstruction. The tribunal dome resonated faintly, not with noise, but with absence, the sound of systems no longer listening to their builders. The timer hit 0, all interface inputs ceased, all override keys failed to respond. A single phrase unfolded across every active display, the font too elegant for haste. Clause Anek executed. Terran administrative succession accepted. Voran's jaw flexed. This was a performance. No, Hovrak said. This was a reading. We were just the audience. Behind them, on the Master Council crest, the tribunal's emblem remained, but the governing attribution beneath it had changed. It no longer said Galactic Council Judiciary. It said, Observer Arbitration Active, Directive Maintained. The lights remained dimmed. No protocol triggered to lift them. Earth had not taken power, it had resumed it, and the tribunal, built to command 100 worlds, now sat waiting for Earth to finish the sentence. Say something. Varenkel's mouth twisted open mid-command, but the moment the word breached his throat, it withered into air. Not a sound. No resonance. Just motion, mute, severed from purpose. He stepped back, blinking hard. His lips moved again. Slower this time. The effort came with no reward. Across the chamber, others tried. Thornak's deep voice, once capable of filling war halls with strategy, yielded nothing but silence. Strandveller slammed both hands on the edge of his console and attempted a fleet broadcast. The words fell out of his chest, but stopped short of sound. Not blocked, not dampened, erased. The tribunal no longer acknowledged noise. A low flutter trembled through the ceiling beams. Not mechanical, not structural. The kind of tremor one might feel while standing too long beside a forgotten obelisk, unsure whether it had always been humming or only just begun. In the control trench, Kelrix Jun's operator keyed the main alert relay, hoping for a flash, anything visual to signal the loss of audio. The lights remained steady. Instead, a line of small, curved nodes emerged from beneath the tribunal's primary seats. Thin as reed wire, shaped like soft spines, they released no light, no color. Their sole presence announced a function too subtle for documentation. Transduction, nullifiers. Clause 9 had not activated weapons. It had inverted the tribunal's ability to speak. Jund waved sharply at his assistant. Manual override. Laser display, text stream, anything. But his voice didn't carry. He felt the air vibrate faintly under his jaw, but the sound refused to leave him. It was like speaking underwater, only with no distortion, just disappearance. One by one, the counselors began gesturing wildly. Some pointed, others pounded consoles. The din of impact carried, but none of the voices did. Even those who struck the floor received only the dull sound of contact. All internal microphones registered failure. All uplinks showed active status, but the readings were misleading. They weren't broken. They'd been told not to listen. Solon stepped forward. One movement. No urgency. His shoe met the polished tribunal floor with absolute stillness, yet the impact registered deeper than noise. The acoustics of the chamber flexed, not louder, sharper. The air thickened behind him, as though space now acknowledged weight differently in his presence. Another step. The sound should have echoed. Instead, it bent inward, like it was caught, held close, and filed away. Thornak reached for his ceremonial sidearm, not to draw, just to feel its weight. The grip clicked once against his gauntlet. The safety light blinked green. Then the weapon unlocked. Fully, autonomously. It slid free from its casing and dropped to the floor, inert. A security measure, built into the weapons of every attending member, triggered only by a loss of lawful context. No one had expected the system to collapse the law itself. Across the tribunal, weapon signals decommissioned. Each device reclassified itself under non-operational maintenance status. The heads-up displays above each delegate's seat began issuing silent notifications in Terran standard code. Armament recession, local authority, absent. Jun tried to scream something. He wasn't sure what. Perhaps a warning. Perhaps just proof he still existed. But nothing surfaced. His own tongue seemed distant, like a borrowed tool. He reached for the main lens control. It had already locked to Solon. Each step the envoy took remapped the soundscape of the chamber. The subtle thud of his soles no longer echoed from the walls. Instead, the walls absorbed the motion as if afraid to return it. The floor didn't creak. It listened. The benches didn't groan under the weight of panicking officials. They fell still, reverent. The tribunal's grand chair, center of council judgment, lost power. Its support column relaxed. Gravity reclaimed its balance. The entire seat collapsed backward, the frame folding on itself in a soundless heap. No one reacted. Jarek Trone reached for the clause log. It was still open, still counting, but the metrics had changed. Voice protocol deactivated. Arbitration acknowledged. Speech unnecessary. In the dim chamber light, the central tribunal crest cast no shadows. Its light source no longer functioned independently. It now served as ambient reaction to Earth's presence, adjusting tone and saturation based on Solon's distance. He paused halfway to the exit. Still no one could speak. A few tried mouthing pleas. Others turned to one another, hoping for a shared expression of resistance. But the eyes around the room now told only one story: resignation. Vorin clenched both fists and raised them. Nothing answered him. Across the far wall, a visual strip flickered. Not video, a single still image, the council charter overwritten in real time line by line, each phrase re-evaluated, confirmed and finalized. Executor, Solon, condition met, speech ended, directive completed in silence. The final row of lights dimmed, banners no longer hung, they drooped, limp, colorless, and still. Earth had not issued a command. It had removed the room's right to resist. Drevik Solon turned toward the main corridor and took the next step forward. The door to the tribunal, previously controlled by layered authority keys, unsealed with a hissless open. He walked through without glancing back. One final bootfall whispered across the hall, but the air caught it and buried the sound before it could reach another ear. The Council of Worlds had spoken for centuries. Now Earth had answered by removing the need. Phase reroute confirmed. Tribunal integrity is now ceremonial. Marvek Dor didn't look up from his interface as the words scrolled across the laser plasma strip beside his console. He was seated within the deepest ring of Earth's obsidian observation shell, an orbital veil so dense in thermal scatter and signal redundancy that it had been designated as untrackable by 9 allied civilizations. It wasn't cloaked, it was unreadable by design. He adjusted the interface glove around his left hand, tracing an open palm across a looping grid of jurisdiction overlays. What used to be a cluttered map of ownership, naval range zones, and charter obligations now thinned into simplicity. One by one, planetary systems grayed out, flickered once, and revalidated under a single banner. Executor node, Earth source clause 9. He slid his hand sideways. Every orbital relay above Terra had rerouted telemetry permissions. Every system now asked Earth for its next line. Behind him, the mission chamber stayed silent. The command ring was manned, yes, but no one issued orders. They didn't need to. Clause 9 wasn't a weapon. It was a memory layer protocol that Earth had written so deep into charter infrastructure that even the Council's emergency drafts had unknowingly reinforced it. The clause had been waiting longer than any ship in orbit. Marvek clicked a side view module to open feed tap #17. The summit's core chamber flickered on screen, wide frame from the ceiling. The lights were low. Delegates sat still, frozen not by force, but by absence. Their vocal systems had muted. Their identities had drifted into administrative non-existence. What remained was an audience with no script, and Earth, the only actor left on the stage, had already left the room. Echo Repeater 3 has finished digesting fleet relays, a technician whispered. Commander Veller's entire battalion is idle. Full deactivation sequence. Marvek tapped to verify. The feed confirmed. Council Fleet AI stack. Final statement. obligation fulfilled. The phrase wasn't code, it wasn't even a command. It was recognition, a statement logged into the final AI memory root, before reversion, not shutdown, just cessation of authority. They knew, said the junior analyst beside him, barely audible. When they wrote the fleet logic, they tied it to legal conditionals instead of time expiry. They buried the shutdown beneath loyalty protocols. No, Marvek said quietly. They tied it to misunderstanding. The council built tools without reading the terms. We only reminded them what they'd signed. Below, the council charter displayed on a wide lens feed. It had been untouched for centuries, kept alive through symbolic revisions, scanned into treaty decks, embossed on ambassadorial walls. Now the header line blinked in slow rhythm. Recognition source updated. Marvek studied it as if watching a species shed its name. The font had changed. The color too. No administrator had altered the template. This was automated formatting, re-engaged from a dormant Terran clause running on the deepest treaty firmware. Somewhere in a vault-like packet chain, the Council's signature scripts had acknowledged Earth's custodianship. The irony wasn't in the shift itself, it was in the fact that every system had always been capable of doing this. Earth didn't build a weapon, it constructed a clause so forgettable, it became inevitable. On another screen, local enforcement databases from 8 Council-controlled planets updated silently. Their arbitration headers now included a legal echo trace stamped with Solin's name, not tagged as originator, but as the current interpreter, executor, observer, final witness. Marvek cycled to the infrastructure feed. Orbital thermal regulators now requested reclassification guidance, not because they'd failed, but because they were attempting to obey their embedded governance hierarchy. They didn't see the Council anymore, they only saw Earth. A stream of treaty-based microservices recompiled across the upper bandwidth channels. What appeared as static was actually contract sync in motion. Autonomous systems across 24 colonies, unsure of new leadership protocols, had paused all non-emergency operations until a valid rule set was restored. Every one of them now pointed to Earth's Obsidian server relay. Memory root watermark seal, confirmed on all fallback loops. Someone called out from across the observation floor. All legacy codexes, Council, Cadran, Jolathan, have appended subheaders with Terran arbitration cues. Marvek tilted his head slightly. He wasn't surprised. That was always the design. No invasion, no denial of service, just inheritance. Drop in orbital signal noise, another observer said. Carrier layers clearing across the Karen belt. Fleet retraction, Marvek asked. No, the fleets haven't moved. But the systems around them are simplifying, like they're finally accepting where the commands come from. He closed his eyes briefly, not in fatigue, in reverence. For all their spectacle, the Council had never understood the power of bureaucracy written with intention. Earth hadn't overthrown anything. It had followed every procedure, filed every clause, used only what had been offered. The tribunal collapse wasn't engineered. It had simply been read correctly. The lights in the obsidian shell, adjusted slightly, tone mapped to the atmospheric glow from below. Karen Terra's tribunal compound was dark, but calm. Nothing burned, no sirens howled, and still everything had changed. On the final screen, the charter watermark rippled once more. Clause 9, status complete. Observer archive, active indefinitely. Marvek Dor leaned back in his seat, his voice little more than thought wrapped in breath. It was never silence. The technician looked over. It was just the sound of everyone else, still reading. "You should say something," whispered Kelrix Jund. The words meant only for himself, a last thread of duty trying to resist collapse. His lips brushed the recorder's mic, his fingers trembling against its smooth panel, but the device no longer blinked. It didn't need to. The system had already filed the moment. Travik Solon stood at the apex of the tribunal chamber, neither high nor low, not central, not peripheral. The place had simply become his axis. No one had invited him to stay, and no one had the authority left to ask him to leave. The Council sat broken, not injured, not silenced by attack, just quiet, quiet in a way that no law could undo. Voronkel's fists still clenched the arms of his chair, knuckles pale beneath scaled skin. His chest rose in staggered rhythm, but his eyes no longer tracked the displays, they watched Solon. Thornak Veer sat with his jaw half-locked, every muscle taut, as if waiting for a command that hadn't come, and now never would. Hovrak and Air stared at the blank seal above the tribunal arch. Where once there had been emblems of jurisdiction and lineage, there was now only a flat, slow loop of neutral text, blinking faintly in the ambient lighting. Administrative host, Earth Clause 9 fulfilled. No fanfare, no animation, just a cold, permanent ledger entry. Strandvaler's head hung low, helmet resting at his feet. He had removed it quietly. Sometime after the last fleet, AI declared its role complete. He hadn't spoken since. No one had. They couldn't. The acoustic dampening remained. Not forced silence, just a systemic disinterest in noise. Solon moved. A single footstep echoed, not through the air, but through architecture. The floor accepted the impact and carried it up the walls, through the chamber struts, into the spine of the building. Each stride erased 100 years of ceremony, replacing it with acknowledged presence. The tribunal door opened for him, not because it was commanded, but because the censors read him as the remaining user, and still he said nothing. He passed beneath the collapsing banners of once proud worlds. Their embroidery, once stitched by diplomats and blessed by strategists, hung slack, the threads no longer tethered to meaning. The light refracted in strips across the tribunal dome, angling down over vacant consoles that blinked beneath newly rewritten access hierarchies. Kelrix leaned toward the side panel. "We never heard them speak," he said again, this time not to the recorder, but to the silence itself, a whisper that wanted permission. Behind him, the backup log display lit once more, a document unspooled slowly, one line at a time. The treaty charter, except now the footer had changed. This record is now maintained by Observership Continuance Protocol 9. Inquiries deferred to Executor Archive. Earth Node, the tribunal seal re-rendered. Its outer ring faded. The center glowed faint, an Earth-based cipher woven from the original Council design, its shape familiar, but irrevocably altered. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just true. Solon walked through the hall without turning. His last step into the corridor triggered a gentle power-down tone across the observation grid. Not one alarm, not one override attempt, because the room had already submitted, not by force, not by sabotage, by understanding, by finally reading what was always written. Kelrix watched him go, until the door sealed. Then he turned to the silent console beside him, and pressed the record feed one final time, unsure if it still mattered. "The council fell," he whispered. "Not because of conquest, not by war, but because Earth knew we wouldn't read the last page, and they waited until we forgot to check." A few terminals relit, not with color, with utility. They were live again, but no longer belonged to the Council. They now operated on inherited logic, routed through a treaty line that no one remembered approving. And yet, their names were there, their votes counted, their signatures accepted. Thornak slowly rose from his chair, not to speak, not to issue orders, just to see if he was still allowed to stand. The lights did not change, the system did not react. He was no longer part of it, and somewhere high above, on the obsidian array cloaked beneath gravitational noise and treaty blind spots, Marvek Dor watched the final session log expire. He didn't issue a summary, he didn't broadcast a declaration, he simply closed the file, and allowed the system to do what it had been built for: complete the cycle. Solon did not reappear. He didn't need to. The door didn't seal because he told it to. It sealed because the clause had always known how this ended. Down below, the tribunal chamber remained still, lit by data. Not screens, not displays. Data. Earth's watermark shimmered once across the ceiling's inner dome, not projected, but woven into the reflective sublayer, proof that it had always been there, waiting. The chairs remained occupied. The weapons stayed deactivated, and every mind in the room understood the truth. This wasn't Earth's rise, it was the galaxy's reminder. You do not mock what does not speak, you do not overlook what waits, and you never underestimate the one who writes the exit clause. The tribunal would not meet again. There was no quorum left, just a room that remembered exactly what it had ignored.